So we're recording for the class, and we're doing the additive process on top of a just a cutout, my gingerbread man cutout from the hard wax, poured out wax sheet of wax, and then we're doing this additive process on the top of it to actually build our volumes. And we don't want to do that with a face tube, but anyway. So that's how that would proceed if you're going to be doing a figure of some kind. And if you're going to do an elk or a deer or a grizzly bear, I mean, we would do it the same way, probably from the side view. And then eventually we're going to have to take that side view and kind of slice the legs and try to pull the legs apart and to make the legs a little bit wider and create a belly in the middle of a four-legged creature, which is, I will show you how to do that, and we'll walk you through that part when we get there. If you're going to do a four-legged creature sculpture of some kind.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah, you go right ahead and ask that question.
Well, two things. One, Alyssa Smokey is with McKenna. I just want to put that out there because you didn't check the chat yet. And two, if you're making, you know, something in the round, like a human figure or an animal, would it not, is there a reason you don't suggest just starting with like the base shapes, like a cylinder or something along those lines?
Well, you know, I'm the kind of guy who really likes the additive process. And I'm going to try to get you guys to not think in terms of the subtractive process, which is carving. In a lot of ways, it's easier to do the additive process than to carve something down. Plus, something about the additive process allows you to, well, to do this. You can, like, I'm starting off this human figure as just a standing figure with its arms at its sides, just so that I can get something started. But this is not what my sculpture would be like. If I wanted to then take this thing and pose it so that it was doing something like running or something like that, I'm going to cut the legs apart from each other and get this party started here. I can pose this thing like a big Barbie doll. I can take the legs and I can then make them, you know, into a gesture of walking or running or dancing or something like that. I can then take the arms and pull them out of the plane that they were in and start to get outside of the normal plane of what I wanted of what I was starting with. The additive process opens up a lot more freedom a lot faster than a subtractive process of carving something out of a really large, thick thing. And I'm not providing you with large, thick things. And I have had people take a whole bunch of these pieces of wax and try to like laminate them all together, welding them together with a hot knife, carefully stacking them and building them up and trying to build up form like this. And it always tends to become a mess. Because nobody ever really is able to weld everything successfully, and sometimes these things delaminate and they fall apart again. It's a way of thinking about trying to approach the figure from the additive rather than a subtractive process, trying to build up form from nothingness rather than trying to do what Michelangelo did and trying to see the figure in the stone and then carve away everything that is not the figure. Maybe that's the way your brain works. I don't know. And that, if that is, that's wonderful. And if you are the reincarnation of Michelangelo, that would be fantastic. But that's not how my brain works. So I'm usually doing something where I'm working with an additive process to create wax sculpture. And that takes me right into my next thing. So can I show you another thing while I'm here really quick? Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to go back to another camera angle here. And so we're gonna do the side camera angle over there, looking at my tabletop. And let's see if I need to get closer to the camera so that you can see what I'm up to just a little bit better. But another part of joining things together, either from the building up from the gingerbread person or when you get to larger volumes that are already built up, sometimes you're going to be posing this thing, sometimes you're going to be building this thing up, and pieces are falling apart. You know, it's really hard to get things stuck together. Sometimes a joint like a shoulder or something like that will just through fatigue, it will come apart, it will fail, or the sculpture will fall over and break like this. Let's break this arm off. He broke the arm off. Okay, and so we have to deal with, how do we put the arm back together again? Now you could just keep fighting with this and keep just sticking that arm back on there and just using the natural wax adhesion to try to make the arm stick into place. I can't remember how this was on there. It was on there, something like that. But I also want you to know that the wax will melt. And so that means we can actually weld the wax together. And so I'm going to get out a knife and some propane and make a welded joint here for you guys. Now, I have like 8 of these propane torches in the studio here. I do not have enough to send one home with everybody so that you guys all have propane torches. And even if I did, the liability of me sending out propane torches to you guys to burn your own houses down or your apartments would be a bad thing. I understand from last quarter that people who are living in student housing can't use open flame. I get that. But somehow this is something that really needs to be factored into your sculpting, and either do this outside on the back porch or try to do this off of the burner in your kitchen if you can do that without making too much of a mess. But anyway, I'm going to turn this on. This has a valve, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So lefty loosey, use a striker to get the flame going. It's a blue flame that you can probably see on camera, kind of, sort of. Okay, so I've got this broken arm here that I need to reattach. And so I'm going to take a butter knife, just a regular stainless steel crappy butter knife that I stole from someplace. I think I got these from Goodwill, actually. And about 8 seconds in the flame, and then take it over here and put it between the 2 broken surfaces, which melts both mating surfaces. And then when you pull the knife out and push the 2 parts together quickly, and then you don't wiggle it, the 2 mating surfaces will go back together again. And as it freezes off and it comes back down to room temperature, you've got a weld. You've got a welded joint that is strong, and that is not something that has a lot of fatigue in it from being wiggled a whole lot while you're sculpting it or building it up from the additive process or something like that. God, this is terrible. Okay, you guys can't see what I'm doing, so I'm going to change camera angles here because that would be better. So again, from this camera angle, this is the joint right here that I just welded. And I'm going to come in and weld it some more with my torch. So I got to get the torch onto the camera, and I've got to get my knife in here, and I'm going to try not to melt my webcam. I'm going to try not to burn my nose off, but I'm going to bring this hot knife down here and plunge it into the weld zone so that I can see that the wax melts, and then I pull it out of the melted wax and I can see the wax freezing off again. And I'm going to turn this to another side of the broken part on the thing. And again, take the knife and plunge it in and then pull it back out. I see the wax melt and it becomes shiny. And then as the wax freezes off and comes back down to room temperature, it becomes dull in its reflectiveness. I'm going to take a little bit of wax like this and roll it out between my thumb and forefinger and kind of make myself a little welding rod. And I'm going to put it in the groove where I'm welding. I'm going to heat up the point of my knife again. And I'm going to apply the knife to that little piece of wax welding rod and melt it. And then it has filled the groove with molten wax. And now that is also coming down to room temperature and becoming a strong welded joint. So I'm just going to a few things up here while that is kind of in process here. Um, I've got a little place where the deltoid muscle is making a little bit of a wonderful little crack on the backside of that arm. And I'm going to weld this back together again like that. And so we have to try to figure out for you guys in housing how you're going to be able to weld with a hot knife and
Would a
work
soldering
somehow with
iron
with
work?
flame. What was that?
Would a soldering iron work?
Soldering iron would be great. I have 5 or 6 soldering irons and I can loan them out to you guys so that it's an electric soldering iron you could plug in and you could do that. That would be fine. So I've got this arm welded back together again. The wax is kind of a not quite as dark brown color. It's kind of a little bit more brown, tan color. And that also indicates that it's warm. So as it cools off and comes down to room temperature, it will get a deeper brown. Another indicator of whether that is soft wax that should not be disturbed or whether it is, becoming a hard wax that can sustain its own shape and is strong and that I can start sculpting on it again. So that's one way of working with the wax is actually working with heat and being able to weld the wax to do different things. This figure was built in the same way that this figure was created. I started off with a gingerbread person. It was about 8 to 10 inches tall. I built out the volumetric parts of it, building out the front of it on the front half of the gingerbread cookie and the back half on the back side of the gingerbread man, working out the process of the spine, the shoulder blades, details of the hips and glutes on this side, details of breast forms, rib cage, abs, all of that kind of stuff, hips and quads on the front side. Of course, when you're building out the head, you've got a really big volume to kind of work with because the head is actually a little bit longer cross-sectionally from the side than from the front where it's much more of an oval kind of a shape. So we're building out volume as we build out the snout of the face. The jaw and the dental arches and the nose really protrude way further than the eyes in their eye sockets. And so you really have to build the face out quite a bit coming outwards to make a three-dimensional head. That's something that we don't realize because we're so used to looking at ourselves in the mirror. We're so used to looking at images on screens or in photographs that we're used to looking at a flat image from the front, but we're really not used to seeing the three-dimensionality of the head from the side. So when you guys are trying to do a human head, if you are going to try to do a human head that is naturalistic and representational, we will have to take a moment to consider that we have to build out the front of the head quite a bit because it protrudes forward into space a lot. Okay, so that was a little bit of a demo doing that. I'm going to change camera angles again. There's two things in the chat that I haven't looked at yet, so now I got to look at those. Turn on the chat, James. Okay, Harlan is with Amanda. Gotcha. Alyssa, Smokey is with me. Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm all caught up now. Thank you very much. Let's see did anybody else come here late? No, not yet. So this is pretty good for today. This is all right. So until I can get wax into your hands, you're going to have to take my word for it, how wonderful wax is. But I want to suggest one other kind of a thing when we get wax into your hands. For those of you who have never sculpted before, you might want to try something very, very small first, just so that you can warm up some wax in your hands and smoosh it and smash it around a little bit and play with the wax. You might remember this thing from Monday night. It's a kind of a fertility figure. It's kind of like a prehistoric fertility figure. That would be something possible to do in wax. We've got the back side dealing with the hips and the process of the spine through the center of the back. These fertility figures historically, had really teeny tiny heads, virtually no or vestigial arms or legs. They really were all about, the reproductive system, and they were about fertility. They were kind of like a good luck charm, to really make sure that people had success through the whole reproductive process, because without hospitals or doctors or anything, pregnancy and childbirth was super dangerous for the early part of our species, and probably a lot of people may have had problems with it. Although maybe they didn't. Maybe we invented all of our problems in the modern age. I'm not sure. But anyway, that was something celebrated in these figures, and that might be something you could do. Or a small, happy little critter like a kitty cat or a sea turtle. I get a ton of sea turtles. Everybody wants to make a sea turtle around here. I guess it's because we're on the coast, or because sea turtles are relatively easy forms for us to process and envision, so that a sea turtle lends itself to the modeling process in wax and the casting process in bronze. But if you did a small frog or a small dog or something like this, a cat, a bunny rabbit, something like that, it's a way of breaking the ice and trying out something that is kind of low stakes. And so if it's a failure, it's not a big deal. And it's not going to frustrate the hell out of you for weeks and weeks and weeks, because it's just something small and cute and it doesn't matter. So usually that's a great way to get started with a small sculpture. And then you can go from the small piece to something a little bit bigger, a little bit more ambitious, and something that's going to take a little bit more time, because there's more surface area here to manage than in a smaller figure. This could be probably knocked out in an evening of class time. A figure or some kind of sculpture that's this size is going to take 3 or 4 weeks to sculpt and to refine it and to get it to where you want it to be. So I would like to recommend that when we start sculpting, we start something cute and little and small. This is also something that can be given away to somebody else. This might cost you $1 worth of bronze, and it's something that you can give to one of your parents or another significant other, something like that. And they're charming and they're wonderful. The only thing that I want to tell you about small things is that jewelry does not really work in cast bronze. Anything that's going to be worn on the skin, like a bracelet, or a necklace, or especially rings, will turn your skin green, because bronze is 99% copper. And as soon as you wear off any kind of a spray coating that we put on the bronze, and your skin comes in direct contact with the copper, it'll turn your skin green, it'll start to itch, it'll make a rash, and it's no fun. So I don't really recommend jewelry pieces that are going to come in contact with the skin. Possibly a brooch, if you can figure out a way to silver solder a pin back onto a brooch. You could make something like that. You could make some kind of a small charm that could go on a charm bracelet, or a small charm with an eye in it that you could thread a gold necklace through. Any kind of gold necklace that's on your skin is not going to turn your skin green. And then just a little charm on the end of it might be worn outside, outside of a shirt or something, so that it's not up against your skin. So that could be a possibility. Charms, small things that could be added to a necklace would work. Okay, we are kind of dead in the water here until I get the wax and the tools out to you. And I'm kind of halfway through that process. I had 10 boxes made up last quarter because I had 10 people. All the boxes came back, and I took back all of the stuff, and then I tore the boxes down and used them for other things. So I'm starting from scratch, building up these boxes for you guys. I have lots and lots of tools for sculpture that I have to divvy up so that everybody gets something. Not everybody can have a great big huge box of tools like this, but you're going to get at least one hand-forged Italian sculpting tool. This has a little bit of wax residue on it, which I will scrape off of here. But I order these things special from New York City. and they get them in, usually imported from Italy, sometimes from China. But this is hand forged out of tool steel. And so one end is a blade shape that has a little bit of a curve to it, and it's a tapering blade. And usually one side is straight and one side is serrated. Both of these sides are serrated on this one. This one has a different shape on the other end. It actually has a curve going this way on it. So it can make other kinds of interesting shapes. And so having these two-ended sculpting tools is really cool. Every person in the class is going to get one of these. I want it back. You don't get to keep this. This is expensive. I need these back, especially if you're not going to be a sculpture person, so you can't have this to keep, but I'm loaning these things out to the class. I'll be loaning out the needle tool so that everybody has a needle tool to do fine sculpting or fine drawing and fine lines on the wax. Everybody's going to get a needle tool. I have a motley variety of dental tools, and sometimes the hook on a dental tool is really kind of a handy thing, again, for sculpting fine details, textures, if you want to do hair texture or something like that, nostrils, eyeballs. Sometimes the dental tools work really good. I'll probably put a butter knife, a stainless steel table butter knife in there. And if you can figure out a way to heat this thing up to at least 300 degrees, then that would be a way of transferring heat into welds to do the welding of your sculpture joints and stuff like that. So everybody's going to get a cruddy butter knife to do welding with. I cannot give everybody a sharp knife because it's a thing. I make this one of the things that people need to buy when they're in my design class or when they're taking the drawing class. Usually I'm asking them to do the craft knife version of this, the arts and craft version of this. What is that kind of knife called? God, it escapes me now. I'm getting old. What is this thing? What kind of a knife is this?
X-Acto knife?
It's an X-Acto knife. Look, it says so right on the handle. It's an X-Acto knife. So if you have to be a crafty person and have X-Acto knives, they come in really handy for cutting the wax and for doing other, cutting things that you need to do with the wax during the sculpting process when we are working in the brown microcrystalline wax. I can't give you knives, but if you can come up with an X-Acto knife, a snap blade knife, or this kind of full-size craft knife, that's really handy for cutting the wax. Otherwise, just using the needle tool and tracing over and over and deeper through your lines will eventually cut through the 1/4 inch thick piece of wax. So you can just use the needle tool to kind of draw your wax pattern on and then cut away the excess wax from your pattern that you're working on. So I'm going to divvy this stuff up and give it out to you. What's the question?
Do most of the sculpture tools that you would use in clay work for wax as well?
Yeah. The only thing is that if you've got a lot of plastic sculpting tools for clay, sometimes they're just a little bit too bendy and they're not quite strong enough for the wax. It's kind of nice to have a steel sculpting tool for the wax, but if you have small wooden tools or if you have really strongly made plastic tools for sculpting with, they would work in wax. The wax is sticky, so you're going to wind up having to clean your tools with your fingernail, pulling the wax off of it because you get wax buildup and stickiness and residue on the tools. It's not exactly the same as working in clay, water clay, but water clay builds up on these things and they need washing when they've been worked with water clay also. So that's a thing. I'm going to try to get this stuff put together so that I'm going to be ringing the dinner bell maybe by afternoon tomorrow and then Friday. And I'll have the stuff here at Eden Hall. which is on the north end of campus. And so you have to drive the ring road all the way around to the back side of campus to come to one of the two parking lots on the back side of campus, either parking lot number 2 or number 3. Eden Hall is the first building from either one of those parking lots. We have the really strange, weird things that are poking up through the roof line that are kind of like windows. We have skylights in the roof here in Eden Hall because we want to try to bring in some diffused northern lighting into our classrooms for painting and for art. So we are the art building that has the windows poking up out of the roof that you can't miss coming onto campus. On the west side, that's the side where the sun goes down. That's the side that's kind of over towards the lake, because the lake is west of us. The west side of the building are several doors, and I've got a 8-foot folding table set up out there, and I'll put all of this stuff out on the folding table. I have to bring it in every night because my homeless people that live around campus like to come over here and trash everything that I leave out. So I have to put it out again every morning for people. So it'll usually be out during daylight hours, from about 9 in the morning till about 5 in the afternoon. If you can come to town and grab that stuff, that would be great. If you're living on campus and can come over from student housing, fantastic. And if you can drive over from student housing, then it's a really short hike up the stairway to Eden Hall, grab your stuff and put it in the car, and then you're going to be good to go. So if I can get toolkits to you guys on Thursday and Friday, then by Monday you will have this stuff in front of you so that we can continue this process. It looks like we're going to be sculpting remotely for at least another week or so. So we might as well get this project started at home, because we can do this kind of stuff at home. We can rough out our sculptures and start sculpting this stuff in wax. Even if it takes us the first 5 or 6 weeks, we can get this done in an online situation, and then we'll have to get together like we did last quarter to actually cast the pieces. So ready or not, by week 5, we will definitely be coming together for the casting portion of the class. And that takes us all the way up to 10 minutes to 7. Are there any other questions for the good of the order? Otherwise, I'm going to call it a night and turn you guys loose. I'll send out an email when I've got all of the kits put together and set out there for you so that it's fair, so that everybody has a chance to come over and get their stuff. And so you'll be looking for that in your email tomorrow sometime.
I have a few questions.
Of course you do. Aurora, what's
Of course
up?
I do. I always have questions for you. Okay, so first of all, there's like 5 of them. Is there a preferred thickness? Or like can anything be too thin? Like for instance, if we're sculpting flower petals, can the petals be too thin?
That's a good
for
question.
Like the casting process.
Yes, that's a really good question. Yes, you can go too thin. People who are trying to make leaves or flower petals like a rose drive me crazy, because roses are really hard to cast. Roses have a lot of petals that are kind of have really deep negative spaces, grooves between the petals, where a lot of boogers get created in the casting process. But if you can try to keep things at least 1/8 of an inch thick, the wax that I'm giving you is more than 1/8 of an inch thick. It's 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch thick, 3/16 to 4/16 of an inch thick. This is as thin as I like to go for cross-sectional thickness on things. But if you make leaves or flower petals or teeny tiny little bones or other kinds of little impossible things, I will try to cast them. But usually 1/8 of an inch is as small as I dare go. And so that's a little bit smaller than the tail that's on this cat. It's about the thickness of the ears on this cat, but I would gate this cat so that my pouring cup was up here and a sprue would come down here, and the cat would be self-feeding, and there'd be a large reservoir of bronze in the head that would help to feed the ears to make sure that the ears cast upside down. So there's technical reasons why we can't cast super thin. We have to have the metal be able to flow in the mold and fill the mold before the metal freezes off. And you'd think that 2000-degree metal would not freeze off, but it freezes off in about a second after pouring it. So it has to get to where it's going, fill up that space completely, and then it starts freezing off right away. So that's the challenge of casting bronze. Question
Okay.
number 2.
What method we'll be using? Are we using the lost wax method?
Yes, we are using a lost wax method. So I'm going to be using ceramic shell as the investment material, but we are doing all of our sculpting in wax. And then these little wax sculptures or patterns are going to be gated up and put into a mold material. And then they're going to be burned out in a kiln. So all of your sculptures are going to get destroyed by burning them out in a kiln, but the impression that they make inside of their molds will remain. And so we will be pouring bronze 2000 degrees into a hollow mold that has taken this shape. And that's the lost wax process. When the bronze has cooled off, you take a hammer and you beat the mold off of it, breaking it off, and then the mold material all falls off, and what you're left with is a bronze version of the original wax sculpture that you made. Next question.
Sorry. If the sculpture is like really tall but thin, like, and I know you just said you hate doing these, but like a single rose on a stem or like a face with a mask and like a hand, but they're hollow and thin, do the height requirements change, or are you still trying to keep it within a certain amount?
Well, until I see the pattern in front of me, I won't know for sure, but
Okay.
sometimes the place where I'm making the molds and I have to dip the patterns into this bucket full of revolving mixture of mold material, I have some space limitations. So sometimes I cut things into pieces and cast them separately, and then I weld them back together with a TIG welder. So I can make long, thin things. Sometimes, though, I have to make editorial decisions about how I'm going to break them into pieces and then weld them back together again. If I have a really long, thin stick, I will take a sprue and run a sprue parallel to it the entire way and put tiny little gates and sprue connections between the sprue and the stick so that the thing looks like a ladder when I get done with it. But that allows me to pour the metal really hard, and then the metal gets forced in at certain intervals along the long stick, and that allows the stick to fill up. So there are all kinds of gating tricks that I use to make sure that thin, long things can get cast.
All right, last question is, if we're making like 3 very small pieces, can they then be welded together after casting? Which I would assume yes, but
Yes, unless they're microscopically small.
well,
If you're going to make things this big, like thimble size pieces,
I
and
was
they're
more
going to be
thinking like the 3 to 5 inch small ones that we are allowed to make, then being welded together to make something larger.
yes,
That can
yes,
be done.
yes. And as a sculptor and a designer, you have to try to make provisions so that the pieces where they weld together, they don't have a whole lot of texture that we're going to be destroying with the weld process. And also, that they have thick enough cross-sectional thickness so that I've got enough meat that I can weld them together with a welding process that isn't just going to melt the base metal away. So they can't just be 1/8 inch thick, tiny little potato chip things that I'm welding together. I can't weld potato chips together. They have to have at least 1/4 inch of thickness for me to be able to weld them successfully. Does that help? That's a challenge.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
You know me, I'll have more questions for you later.
I hear you turning the pages of a book as if you've got a book's worth of questions written down. I'm glad that you're journaling. I would like to encourage everybody to keep a sketchbook or a journal and journal your thoughts and feelings and your dreams and your artistic ideas and draw them in a journal or a book, even though that most of you are not art majors. That's what art majors do, because that's how we develop our ideas into themes and into sculptures and into other things like comic books and graphic novels and all of that other kind of stuff that's really cool and fun. Let's call it a night because we've gone a long time. So thank you all for being here. I'll see you guys again next Monday night for the class. And until then, I'm going to throw these toolkits together and then send you an email when they're ready to get picked up. So have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy the nice weather, get some fresh air, and I'll see you guys again on Monday night. Bye-bye. Oh, is there somebody who also wants to talk? Abby, you have a question for me?
I was just gonna say thank you. Have a good evening.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye, Kayla. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I literally was going to say the same thing. Thank you.
Oh my God. Oh my God. You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks. Bye. I'm going to hit the end button.